Yo ho,
Hey, what's up, man?
what's going on?
Just sitting here for office hours because I thought it would be
Ah.
really cool to make myself available for 3 hours.
Right on. Yeah,
And
man.
I
Yeah.
I think the idea was good, but execution was lacking.
Of what?
Just in the sense of I don't think I gave enough time,
Oh,
and I probably
figure,
should have
figure
spread
out
it out
office
over
hours.
days.
Hmm. Right on. Cool, man. I was gonna tell you, man. Fucking awesome job with supermarket.
Oh, thank you.
Like for realsies.
I've had lots of help,
Can't
so
wait for this shit.
yeah, I'm ready for
Woo.
it to go live. And
Yeah.
we now have enforced HT
Yep.
or HTTPS everywhere, which is kind of cool. So
Fuck yeah.
yeah, I know it's
Word.
been an interesting adventure. I've learned a lot about Chef with it, which is funny because I work for Chef, but my first real adventure into Chef was building the community side out.
Well, there's no better way to learn something than using it, right? So, like, you gotta operate you a community site. So there you go.
I need to actually
Pretty
do a blog
cool.
post about kind of the some of the initial pain around the ops role versus the dev role versus the I'm really the nothing role. And
Yeah.
the real interesting aspect of it is at Chef, a lot of things that would normally be um, you would normally think of as ops roles are actually dev roles, which I hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
I do wonder who the one viewer
Well, I
is.
mean,
Oh, sorry.
there's somebody viewing.
Yeah, there is one viewer.
Uh,
It's kind of cool.
Hello, YouTube.
But yeah, um,
I'll wave too.
it's kind of interesting just how that whole thing works out because there were a couple times where
Yeah.
is that a real phone?
That's my doorbell.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I expect there to be pizza on the other side of that door.
Nah, it's just my girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Pizza would have been awesome. I haven't had pizza in a while. I need to go to a meetup
I've had
actually.
I've had way too much pizza. I ordered pizza the other night, and then we had NYC DevOps last night. And, like there was pizza there, so we'll pizza it out. Um, but yeah, no, like last night was fun because there's a bunch of like surprise people that showed up out of nowhere that I wasn't expecting to come. Like Tim Dysinger showed up, like Pete Cheslott came out of nowhere, and like it's like okay, guess I'm hanging out with Pete Cheslott tonight. So that's funny.
As you're walking through the different rooms, I'm sitting and thinking to myself, this is like a preview from the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, right. You'll find this YouTube recording in the woods.
The problem is you're not breathing heavily and shaking the camera
You can do that if you want.
necessarily. Yeah, exactly.
Or what was the other one with the big giant lizard in New York? What's it called?
To be fair,
Huh.
movies like we normally when I work in offices, uh, lunch conversations almost always at some point while I work there devolve into what movies has Chris not seen or what movies has Chris seen because I have not
Mm,
seen most of them.
giant
And the one
lizard.
viewer went away. I'm sad now.
Cloverfield. That's what I was thinking about. Have you seen Cloverfield? Is
I
this a
haven't.
what? Oh, oh
And the
you
one
watch
viewer
it.
is back.
Good.
It's kind
Oh,
of cool.
hello, viewer.
Um, but yeah, it's been interesting learning chef and the knife stuff has been real interesting. I didn't when I first looked at chef a long time ago. I thought knife was dumb. I was like, why do I want to do these things manually, like the knife bootstrap stuff? But now that I've used
Hmm.
knife, it's like, oh my god, like how did I ever live without this tool?
Yeah, I try to avoid it, quite honestly. But
Well,
it's just me.
but in your current world, you don't do much with like from an operational perspective that makes sense to use knife
Sure
for.
don't. I just use Test Kitchen all goddamn day.
I
And
am determined to write something that I can like open, like I can run one command and it will open a new Tmux window or
mhm.
a new Tmux session and open a Tmux window for every single one of the Tmux or the test kitchen test cases and run them
Okay,
each of them in a separate window, and I can just like tab through. Okay, that's the one OS that's broken.
right. Yeah, there's Test Kitchen C, which will do it concurrently, but it doesn't like the output all kind of comes at once, so it looks like somebody's puking rainbows at you while you're actually testing. Um, I played with Chef Metal a little bit, and that's actually a lot nicer as far as the output is concerned, but it doesn't
Hmm.
support First Shelf yet, so it doesn't quite fit my use case. So that's kind of a
Well,
bummer.
and have you seen Kitchen Metal yet? Because like the thing I'm looking forward to like Kitchen Metal with is so perfect example um, with Supermarket even. We're currently running it with RDS and with Elasticache. Well, it would be bitching to have a Chef Metal recipe that spun up each of those pieces independently. Like it spun
Yeah.
up the RDS instance and spun up the Elasticache instance and then spun up the box and tested in
Hmm.
that environment. Or like there are differences between running Supermarket all on a single host versus running Supermarket on multiple hosts, like
Right.
with the database and Redis instances in different places. So that's where I'm looking forward to playing with some of that testing is being able to go, ooh, kitchen test, and it spins up 3 instances and runs the unit tests against, or the integration test rather, against the cluster instead of against the
Hmm.
um, thingy.
Like
And on the topic
inside
of
of an individual
supermarket,
machine.
exactly. On the topic of supermarket, so one of the things I've been kind of pondering is that at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to need to start kind of like classifying recipes as like this is a infrastructure recipe, like this spins up machines, and this is a software recipe, this spins
Um,
up software. Or does that not
I don't
matter?
know. I mean, like every time we try to like make cookbook classifications, like we end up like I don't know. It all just like in my mind, it all ends up collapsing back into like a cookbook, right? Um, so like the first time this happened was Jamie Windsor's application cookbook, right? It being a cookbook that had metadata that relied on other cookbooks. So you'd have like like MySpace cookbook that relied on, you know, Apache and MySQL and PHP, right? And then you'd have different recipes in that cookbook that would be responsible for each component of this thing. And the idea was like, okay, since you're not actually writing, you know, resources in this thing, you're just calling recipes and like maybe setting some attributes. Like that's a different kind of cookbook somehow, right? Um, so they gave it a name, and that name was application cookbook. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't like it. I just think it's a cookbook, right? Because like
Yeah,
you'll keep having to invent more and more names and drawing like more and more false like circles around you know stuff. Like so like where do you like okay so like a service, right? Okay, what happens when you have a service that's built out of other smaller services and then other services that are built on top of those services, right? So like I don't know, like I just call everything
exactly.
cookbooks. Just I don't like to use LWRPs and HWRPs either. I just say resources now because they're all resources. I don't know.
That makes sense. And so it's funny. Like my worry is like, yeah, no, I guess that makes sense because like you should in concept, like you shouldn't just like pull stuff off the community site and run it. Like you should actually look at that code at least once in concept. Dude, you look frozen, or I'm frozen, one of the two.
Hey, sorry, my computer locked up.
They will do that sometimes.
Yeah, it sucks. It's never really locked up before, but it's done it like twice in the past like month or something. It's starting to concern me. Let's see here. Why are you 200 degrees Fahrenheit? Thing.
I'm only 150.
iTunes? Fuck you, iTunes. Come here. Die. All right.
I forgot what we were talking about. Oh, yes. The
Oh yeah.
differences in types of cookbooks. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. The other thing that's interesting is have you looked at, like, listening to the discussion about Chef Metal? Like,
Um, Okay.
on the Food Fight show?
I did listen to it.
You
Yes,
didn't, or you did?
I did.
Okay, so the fact that it spins up a chef zero and that's how it handles converging the recipes, like, so I guess I wonder, like, how does that work if you are using Enterprise Chef?
Um, I don't know. I haven't played with it really. I mean, like I sat down for a little bit last week and played with it a little bit just to see if it would be useful to me. But because it doesn't, like, cause right now in Chef Metal, you kind of have to have like a directory or like a project directory that is like it's kind of like a chef repo, right? So you need to like put your cookbooks in that repository, right? Um, so it doesn't like support Bookshelf natively like Test
Mhm.
Kitchen does. So if you said like MKDA here, I'll just show you a GitHub repo and playing around with it.
Well, and I was thinking that I basically would have to like tell Berkshelf to vendor the cookbooks in that directory and
Yeah,
then run them.
that's exactly what you have to do. And that's a bummer because I don't want to do that. Whereas Test Kitchen does that for you automatically and transparently, right? Like it does it, right? So, like if you go CD MySQL, for example, you type kitchen test, it'll actually go and like download, like SC Linux and Yum and apt and all that junk and put it like in a little temporary directory and like vendor those for you and then upload them to the thing and put them where they need to be and hit go, right? Right now, Chef Metal doesn't do that yet. So like for my particular like individual cookbook development like use case, like it's not super duper useful to me yet until it supports that. And I don't know what that'll look like. I actually looked at Kitchen Metal a little bit too, and it's not quite baked. So I talked to John about it. He's like, "Yeah, we're not there yet." I'm like, "Okay, that's cool. Like, let me know when you are, and I'll help you test it." But yeah, it looks promising because like the output formatter is really nice, and like yeah, we definitely do need a way to like spin up clusters of machines and do like a I don't know like a Selenium test against it, for example. Um, but yeah, in the meantime. Yeah. So yeah, I get over that hump on the HTTPD cookbook I was talking about.
Yeah,
Um, I finally like got it to the point where I could just like color in the rest of it now. It's pretty cool. Um,
nice.
Here, let me send you
Have you
test.
published it yet to the community site?
Yeah, it's like an O dot zero to zero to like two or something. It's there, but it's probably even shouldn't be. The only reason I publish it is so I can squat like the namespace, quite frankly.
You should try publishing it to Supermarket.
So I just like change the URL in Stove, right?
Yeah, I bet you have to do that using a like I haven't actually had a chance to play with Stove, right? Because like
Mm.
yeah, I actually don't have any cookbooks that I personally own. Go figure.
Right. Oh, I mean, you own all the ones on Opscut Cookbooks, dude.
Yeah, but like I can't just like goofing and play with it, and I yeah.
Yeah. So check this out. Um, so there's an integration test for HTTPD. I'm sorry, not an integration test, but a test recipe. Like that shit works on Debian and Ubuntu now, both 2.2 and 2.4. And I just started working on like CentOS 6 and like Fedora and all that junk. So, but
I
yeah,
love that HTTPD service delete. That
yeah,
is awesome.
yeah. But like I found like it was annoying because like the way I had to actually implement that was if you look in here, I had to give um, here you go. So if you look at the libraries and then like the provider for Debian or Ubuntu, I have to actually dynamically generate the resource titles because like Chef Spec doesn't. It's not run context aware. Like it works like Chef 10, right? So see that used inline resources at the top of the thing on like line 7, right? What that does is it creates a closure in like a completely walled off like Chef universe, right? So if I have like a directory, like Etsy Apache 2, right? If I have that in a create action as well as a delete action, right? When it goes to compile this recipe here, my test recipe, it'll get a conflict, right? So the way Chef works, it'll actually try to clone the resource, and then it'll like try to like merge the attributes together, which is not at all what it went. So like I've got it fighting with it about like what the create action needs to be, create or delete. So I actually, in order to actually spec this thing down, I had to like go and like dynamically generate like the resource title and like the action into the name of the thing. So like that's weird. But the handy side effect of having to do that is that that's going to work on Chef 10 now as well. So that's cool.
Remind me, which version is OpsWare OpsWorks using?
OpsWorks. Yeah.
Fork, right?
Well, when they very, 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 very first released, it was like Chef 9 or something, like crazy old like that. And then they got 10 pretty quick, and then they've been supporting 11 for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're like trying to do something to support like server recipes, recipes that were being written towards for servers, but like they're their own little walled garden anyway.
Yeah, which is, as an aside, is like totally cool. Like from a chef perspective, like or community perspective, I guess is the proper way to say it. Like there are multiple different chef projects. You've got the Go-based chef server that's working. You've got OpsWorks. You've got what did we see earlier today? Something that doesn't use Omnibus.
Yeah.
Like someone that's packaging it up, not using Omnibus, which, like, I totally get, and it's kind of interesting. Not my style, but totally cool.
Well, I mean, like we've had people pop into IRC, like there's some guy from like the Seuss project in there. Like, hey, I'm trying to package this thing. We're just like, just use Omnibus. And he's like, well, I can't because I'm trying to, like build like, platform native like archives for this thing so that it could be in SUSE, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, that's like the one use case that you shouldn't use. Like, yeah. So, yeah, no, it's interesting to like watch how like the ecosystem, kind of like evolves.
Exactly. I'm actually a way huge fan of Omnibus in some regards, as the guy that fucked up the compile of OpenSSL and deployed it to the entire infrastructure.
Nice.
And then, so Puppet was linked against that version of OpenSSL, and this was back before like we were using packaging yet and all that crap. Like we ended up in a place where like you couldn't swap in the new version of OpenSSL because there was a compile issue with it, and it made the various what are they called? It made the certs incompatible. Like if you didn't use that version of OpenSSL, like it was almost like secure because like it wouldn't work with any other version of OpenSSL except for the brokenly compiled one.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing. Like people, like so the people that are like operating system, like distribution, like kind of heads. They'll always be like, oh well, you should never ship your own OpenSSL because then when your vendor, your operating system vendor updates that package, like nothing's going to be linked to it, right? My answer to that's always like, well, like it's probably going to fucking break anyway. So like, why not like kind of have individual like vendors of your other software be responsible for the security of their own software, right? So just like, I can see both arguments.
Well, and it's interesting. Like that's cool if you're running Linux, except we were running Solaris, and
Yeah.
like the latest rev of Solaris 10 shipped with 0.9.7b.
I I thought Solaris had their own SSL implementation that wasn't like OpenSSL. I guess
They
I'm,
may have, but the version of OpenSSL that ships with,
it's SSH I'm thinking about, not SSL.
yeah, oh, yeah, no, SSH is different,
Yeah.
and they do run their own. Uh, Hence, the reason I always use SSH was like my quintessential go-to for um,
Mhm.
like examples of software and configuration management that you can get wrong really easily.
Mhm.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't take. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You can't take OpenSSH configs and run them on Solaris, at least not like Solaris proper.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. At least not Solaris 9 or Solaris 10. I
Mhm.
do not know about Solaris 11 because I haven't run Solaris 11. I actually should do that.
Yeah. So I went down the path like I went down the path of rewriting the OpenSSH cookbook to be the new the not the new but the same kind of pattern I used on like MySQL with like different providers for different platforms. And I got around to the Solaris ones. I'm like, oh yeah, this is different. um,
Yeah.
uh, list. Red Hat man. So somebody sent me an email earlier, like, hey, I'm trying to run MySQL on like Red Hat 6. How do I make it work? I'm like, it should totally work, because I tested it on CentOS. Turns out, actually, that no. So I added the Oracle's like MySQL community repo thing to the
Hmm.
cookbook, so that all versions were supported on all of the raw platforms. So you can run like 5.6 on like CentOS 6 or Red Hat 6, and the Yum MySQL community cookbook turns out is actually broken on real Red Hat because the like in like the Yum URLs it'll say like uh, dollar release for like in like Yum configs, right?
Yeah.
So the system can like figure out like its like version and architecture.
Hmm.
Um, Turns out that real Red Hat identifies itself as 6 server instead of just 6, right? And then the repos on the other end just had /6 on there, so you couldn't use dollar release for on real Red Hat against like the Oracle like Yum repos. So it's like, oh, okay. So I had to like go add a bunch of like case logic to like the Yum cookbook, like push it, and now it works. But
Have you set up Test Kitchen to test against RHEL now?
yeah, there's a AMI on UC2, like a real give me money, real AI AMI.
Hmm. Well, that's
So
what I figured. I was just more curious if you had added that because I kind of use the MySQL cookbook as the starting point for my .kitchen.cloud in
yeah,
places that I don't have one.
yep, I've updated it. Yeah, I do the same thing. I'll copy it around. But for a long time, I was using Yum as my like thing. I'd copy. I had like a function that would copy like the testing harness like from one cookbook to another.
Hmm.
Um, I really want to. If I have time, I want to write a tool to like just like drop a testing harness off in a cookbook, like the up to date testing harness for it. Um,
With
I ju-
Chef DK, you should be able to do that
yeah,
eventually.
that'd be cool.
Like I don't know that it's shipped, but I know that there was talk about a feature where you could that like so you've got the chef generate commands.
Hmm.
There's talk about being able to ship a different skeleton, and then you may want to look at Mies because you may be able to just customize the way Mies works.
Yeah, it's not quite. You know what I mean? So for example, I want to be able to like CD into like a cookbook directory, and like let's say I last time I touched it, like I I was using, CentOS like 6.4 or whatever. I don't know. I just want to like make sure that the gem file and like the guard file, like all that junk is like up to date, like for it. But it also needs to do some like dynamic generation of like the kitchen YAML and some other things. So like, yeah, I don't know.
What would be cool, just as an aside to that, like the one thing I've been pondering is the dot. So we do a .kitchen.cloud.yaml and a .kitchen.yaml.
Yeah.
And really, the only thing that should be different is the providers section.
Maybe, well, not quite.
There's two sections that are different, but the suites should stay the same.
Right, definitely, for sure.
And what's frustrating is I wish there was a way to like include in Test Kitchen, like separate those two, so that like when I use the .kitchen.yaml or .kitchen.cloud, it had the cloud config and then pulled in the suites, and the same
Yeah.
with the .kitchen, so that you only updated it in the one place.
Yeah,
Because
I
it's
mean,
out of sync.
I think so. You're supposed to be able to like. There's somebody was telling me there's some like merging action thing going on where you could have like a local kitchen.local.yaml and like a bunch of different like kitchen YAMLs. It would read them all and it would try to like merge them together, right? So like I guess make a hash out of the YAML and kind of like merge the options together. But I haven't really played with it. Um, but like I don't use the .kitchen.yamls at all because I like detest Vagrant, right? Um, nothing against Vagrant itself. Let me rephrase. Vagrant's awesome. I detest having to spin up a VM and VirtualBox on my laptop and download packages over my shitty Time Warner internet connection. That's what I hate, right? So like the way I figured it's 2014, I don't have to do that anymore, right? So like I just use the public infrastructure of the service providers. And I'm done with it. But yeah, I had Julian actually update the kitchen YAML in MySQL so that it works against the boxes in the Binto project. So if you need a kitchen YAML to copy around, there's definitely one in MySQL for you.
So I was just thinking about something as we move forward with some of the supermarket stuff. It would be kind of interesting to see, and I don't know how we would do this, but help me out with my craziness.
Sure.
In theory, it would be cool. So right now we do within the metadata.rb, we read that in, and it tells us that it supports particular platforms.
Mm-hmm.
It would be way cool if, like, instead of like on the current supermarket site, the icons are like gray that indicate that. It would be really cool if it was like a gold, like it changed gold or a different color to indicate that not only does that version of the OS or does that OS show up in, what the heck is it called?
Metadata.
In metadata.rb, it also shows up in the test kitchen files.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, like, I really, really want to build some sort of, like, super badass, like, integration testing thing. So, like, when we get a pull request or whatever, it'll actually parse the metadata. Maybe, see, I'm thinking that the kitchen.yaml or some part of it should be generated from the metadata, the QuickBooks metadata, right? So if it says it supports, platform X, Y, and Z, it should automatically add like the platforms to the kitchen YAML based upon the supported in the metadata, right? And then from there, yeah. But it would need some source to draw upon. You know what I mean? So like again, like so this is going to require some sort of tool to actually stick together. So I gem squatted a name for the tool, Lake, Lake. I just
Lake?
liked it. Yeah, I was surprised it was because we have make and rake. It was like fuck it, I'll do lake. We have lake
and
files.
I'm gonna have a lake file in my repo now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of troll the Ruby community a little bit. Right.
I was gonna say, like, there's much trolling going on there. The number of people that will have a conniption about the fact that it's one more file in the root of their directory.
Mm-hmm.
or that it's the name of the file is file. Like someone was talking about like a chef file or a policy file or something the other day, and I was like, no, another
Yeah,
file,
I don't. Yeah, we
another
already have
file.
too many files. But yeah, whatever. But yeah, like so. Yeah, I definitely want to build some sort of like auto pull request generating, like integration testing thingamabobber. The only thing I'm having trouble kind of conceptualizing is how to like defend against like hostile code, right? So what you're doing in a CI system when you're, like accepting pull requests from the public is you are executing arbitrary code, like straight up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like right now, Test Kitchen is powered with environment variables, right? So there's nothing to stop somebody from just like like sending in a pull request that like ships off for AWS keys or something, So like that's the kind of thing I need to like figure out
Well,
how to get around.
it would be interesting, even as part of that pipeline, just
Mm-hmm.
to send an email to us, and we basically like the first part of the pipeline is code review. So it sends an email saying, please look over this code, and then push this big green run the CI button.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yep.
yeah,
Uh,
or
what?
we search the code like the pull request diff for any known environment variables, because we're only using a very select set of environment variables, and if it shows up, it should then prompt.
Yeah, who knows? We'll think of something. Okay. That's why I was actually looking at Chef Metal, was because I was like, you know, trying to assess the situation as far as like, because I was looking at like kitchen Docker and like all that shit, and, like, because right now like I spend most of my time waiting on VMs to spin up.
Mm.
Um, even on Google Compute Engine and DigitalOcean, it's still like way slower than it needs to be. Like I'm sometimes waiting up to like 30, 45 seconds for my test just to start, right?
Yeah.
Um, which is a bummer when I'm trying to do like rapid iteration. It's way faster than Vagrant, but like that's cool. I guess there's uh, a boot to Docker thing now where you can just like run a VM with like a Ubuntu in it, and it'll uh, kind of like just remote control the Docker thing for you. But that's still on my laptop, and I want it in a data center, right? And then you got the other issue where it's like, have you spent any time playing with Docker at all yet?
Not
On that?
yet. As I said, in one of our previous conversations, I understand it. I just don't.
Yeah. Well, so right now, if you do like a Docker like install like Debian or Docker install like whatever,
Mhm.
the images that people are making, um, they're kind of they don't ship with like so Docker like overrides like init basically, right,
Yeah.
for it to work. So, um, like you can't use like your init scripts to start like a service, right? You have
Hmm.
to use something else, right? Right now, everybody I guess is using Runit. Is like the current hot thing for people to use, and it's like okay, well, so
Well,
none
and
of these.
I laugh my ass off at that because, like, to me, the way I understand Docker to work, though, it's like a side of me like dies inside when I see that Runit is doing it, because like, isn't that the purpose of Docker? That like the actual application is supposed to run it, be the only thing running inside the container in concept. So like,
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, everybody's got a boner for this whole like PID one thing, right? Like, oh, I'm running one process in my thing. Well, yeah, when that process dies, your Docker container dies, right? So like, if your process crashes, like the whole container goes away, right? So
yeah,
what do people do is like they put run it in there. I'm like, this is the job of your init system. Like, for fuck's sakes, like just run a goddamn whole thing in there. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're gonna have. So then eventually people are going to be like, oh, well, look at this. The logs are filling up. So how do we run a cron job to clean up the logs? Oh, wait, how do we do this? You run a whole zone, dude. Like, come on. Like, I don't know. So hopefully they'll get over that whole like one
Well,
pin fetish like soon. Might have to like build some custom Docker images that are actual like real operating systems to get the testing done. But whatever.
yeah, it's kind of an interesting discussion just in general. I love what Docker's doing. I love the lightweightness of it, but
Mhm.
I struggle with how it works in for certain applications. For where I see Docker shining is
Mhm.
like you take your Ruby app and instead of having to like run what is it called? Instead of having to run something, a supervisor, you can just run your Ruby app in the foreground. And in concept, like I can just spin up thousands of machines or thousands of containers locally, and I'm not wasting any overhead um, on them. And because they're not just they're completely separate from each other,
Mhm.
memory and all. It becomes if I've got something that's doing a good job of coordinating those Docker instances,
Yeah.
it like the proxy on the front end, like that's killer. Like that to me is the number one use case. But to
Well,
like,
they released some library that's like a Docker
yeah,
proxy thing at DockerCon. I forget what it's called, but it's like it's essentially
Swarm.
that, right? It's like libswarm. So that's cool. Like, yeah, let's do that. But like I still think you need more. Like, okay, so like, what did the run it people do? Like, they start run it as their first process, and then tell run it to manage other services. Like, it's like fine, and I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, and I think
Well,
the chef stuff that got demoed at um,
Docker
ChefCon,
card, yeah,
or we may have demoed it at DockerCon too, does something similar,
yeah.
where
I
like
mean,
Chef comes in and runs as your first process, which that I actually can see making sense. Like to me, there um, you're using that as kind of your configuration endpoint, which I appreciate because you're
yeah,
making sure that the state is right. It's a state manager versus like run it because like that's what you need a init for type thing.
right. Well, I mean, like chef becomes your init, right?
Exactly.
it's the one process that controls them all, right?
And
But
that adds a different set of feature set. That adds a different feature set to me, which is kind of cool because now you have this document that describes the entire state of the container, and like there is no ability to like deviate from it.
well, I mean, you're managing your processes, sure, but I mean, you're still going to have stuff on your file system that may not be covered in your chef.
True.
Like, you know what I mean? Um, but you know, the higher the resolution of your recipe, the better, right?
Exactly.
Which I like. So like this Debian provider here is a perfect example of this. Like, yeah, you can totally get away with like package template service, right? But that's a low resolution chef cookbook. You can also add, var log Apache, var run Apache, like all you can like add like all the configuration directories and Etsy and like do all these things, and that's the higher resolution, makes it more stable. Um, and then there's the service management. I got an issue open actually where it's like, hey, don't hard code the provider. I'm like, ugh, like I, I don't know, whatever. I'm going to focus on getting this HTTPD out the way. This thing's going to be massive. This cookbook, like super massive, like way massive, because like I'm using the same trick where there's an HTTPD underscore service that's just responsible for getting the service up and running, and then
Yep.
you can do other things in the include there, um, which is cool. But like just for Debian and Ubuntu, I have 457 examples already. So by the time I'm done implementing the other platforms just to get the service up and running, it's going to
Mhm.
be like in thousands, right? And that's before I start implementing other things like virtual hosts and configurations and modules and like all that junk. Like going to take a really freaking long time for this thing. But when it's done, this will be the way to configure Apache. It's, like, doing advanced Apache configurations is annoying. Like running multiple instances on a box. Holy shit! Like I didn't know it was that annoying. And now I do.
All right,
So
man. Well,
it's cool because like, huh? Yeah.
I actually think we're gonna call it.
Okay.
I just got a text that I should head downstairs. So,
All right.
no, and we need to follow up more on this Apache thing because, like, you're shaving some very interesting yaks, to say the least.
Yeah. I like it.
So,
But, all right, man. So I'm gonna go eat, and yeah, enjoy your evening.
same.
All right.
You have a good night.
Yep. You too. Later.